Hi, English 9. We're continuing reading The Glory Field by Walter Dean Myers, picking up on page 108. Please make sure you are following along in your book. The short sail was useless in the squalling wind, and Abby had tied it firmly to the mast. The boat was turned straight out toward James's bank, and Elijah spread his legs and braced himself between the oarlocks. He held the oars forward as he watched Abby's smooth rhythm, and then fell in with him. The pull of the oars felt good in his arms and shoulders. He knew it would take a few strokes to get loose, maybe even more than that, but the roll of the boat was good, even joyful. The rounded oar handles, worn smooth by years of pulling through the lowland waters, warmed in his strong hands. Over Abby's shoulder, Sheriff Glover hunched over the tiller, his face dark as he worked out whatever thoughts he needed to be working out. The water just beyond the first bank was rough, with the breaker line running at a sharp angle to the shore. Elijah knew that the tide was coming in, and it was just the wind that was forcing the waves sideways. Beneath the roiling waters lay the sinister and treacherous sandbanks. The water near the banks often changed direction abruptly, or produced a foam that suggested the danger that lay below. The distance between the first sandbank and the larger James's Bank was usually 14 minutes of strong rowing on a good day. It was going to take them longer today, Elijah knew. But it was what lay beyond the bank that worried Elijah. If there was a strong undercurrent, they would be in it once they went past the sandbank. Elijah and Abby pulled together, struggling with the breakers dispersing over the bank. As they got nearer and nearer, the rowing got harder. The muscles in Elijah's shoulders started burning. He was breathing harder. They were drifting left, just as he thought they would, and he eased up on his right oar to turn the boat slightly. Sheriff, we need to get into the current, Elijah called out, toward Gray Rock. Sheriff Glover brought his forearm alongside the tiller and pulled it toward him. The breakers were coming over the bow when the boat dipped forward and smacking against it when it was on the lift. Pull, Abby, pull! Abby put his back into the rowing, and they pulled quickly past the breaker line over the first bank. Hold! Elijah started to yell to Sheriff Glover to take a hard look onto the tiller when the boat began to spin again, first one way and then the other. Elijah looked back and saw Sheriff Glover holding on to the sides of the boat. Abby had seen it too. He pulled his oars into the boat and held onto the sides. We're going too fast, Abby called out. Elijah knew what Abby meant. They were approaching Gray Rock, a small island less than 2 acres in area and approachable only from the side that faced Johnson City. The other side was little more than a rocky projection that invited small boats to their demise. There was a submerged marsh area some 100 feet in front of it. On the far side of the narrow island was a channel through which the ocean seemed to get faster, threatening to carry a vessel out to the cold, inhospitable sea. It was no place to be during a storm. Beyond Gray Rock lay Key Island, which Grandpa Moses had seen Foster on before. But they needed to go to the right of Gray Rock if they were going to have a chance to reach Key Island. Sheriff Glover put his hands to his brow, trying to shield his eyes from the spray that was picking up. It had begun to rain harder. There's no way we can get out there, he called. We better start back. No, Elijah called out to Abby. Keep going. Sheriff Glover unsnapped the leather flap on his holster, pulled the long barrel revolver from its nesting place, and pointed it at Abby. I said turn back, boy. Abby looked at Elijah. Elijah pulled the oar handles into his lap, lifting the blades from the water, letting the boat pick up speed and roll with the sea. Sheriff Glover whirled, pointed the gun at him, and extended his arm. Elijah took a deep breath and held it. He looked over the gun barrel into the sheriff's frightened face. For a long moment, the two of them, Elijah and Sheriff Glover, stared at each other as the boat bobbed and turned in the water. The officer first put the gun down by his side and then lifted it and replaced it in its holster. He turned away from Elijah's glance. The rowing had been hard, but now it was harder, as the boys pulled with all their strength to get past Gray Rock and on to Key. Every muscle in Elijah's back began to ache as he pulled them away from Gray Rock and closer to Key Island. He imagined Abby's face, knowing that his cousin would be in as much agony as he was, but he wouldn't be showing it. There was a line of whitecaps between them and Key Island, also a lot of white and green foam near the island. Abby stopped rowing and pointed. Elijah nodded and stopped rowing too. What's the matter? Sheriff Glover called out. Could be rocks, Elijah called back. He peered into the water, but it was moving too much to be sure of anything. A lot of the islands were in shallow water and had submerged rocks around them. They rowed the boat a little closer, saw what looked like a sandbank under the breakers, and stopped again. They were less than 25 yards offshore. Elijah let himself down over the side of the boat and held on until his feet touched solid ground. He walked toward the shore and felt the jagged rocks beneath his feet. He pointed down at them with his thumb. If Foster and little David had allowed their boat to get too close to the island, it would have been damaged. Sheriff Glover saw what was going on and took out his revolver and wrapped it in the same cloth he had used to bring it to the boat. Stay with the boat, Elijah called to Abby. Abby dropped anchor as Sheriff Glover went over the side of the boat. Elijah led the way on the short walk. He was breathing heavily by the time he passed a large turtle that had disappeared under its shell. Sheriff Glover was right behind him, and alone, out in the water on the bobbing boat, was Abby. You start looking one way and I'll start looking the other, Sheriff Glover said. We can't stay out here too long. Sheriff, why did you come out here with us? Elijah asked. Your grandma might needs the money, boy. Sheriff Glover wiped his nose with the back of his hand. Around here, poor ain't just for ends. Now, let's get on with this.